Welcome to the Warrior Mind podcast. This is where mental strength, emotional mastery, and human potential meet real life. I'm Greg Swanson, and each week we strip away the noise, sharpen the mind, and train the inner warrior required for modern life. Let's get into today's podcast. Most men were never taught how to feel deeply without losing their edge. So they chose one of two options: numb out or overconsumption. Hi, Greg Swanson here with Warrior Mind Podcast, and we were going to finish up our discussion around the four masculine archetypes. Today we're going to be diving deep into the lover archetype. Well, the lover archetype is, probably the most misunderstood force in modern masculinity. Matter of fact, all of them are, the king, the warrior, the magician, the lover, but the lover is really the most misunderstood, at least from a masculine perspective. It is often mistaken for softness and indulgence and emotional excess. But in reality, the lover is neither sentimental nor weak. It's the archetype responsible for aliveness itself. When you see a beautiful sunset or sunrise and you get this feeling inside of you, that's part of the lover archetype. When you do something and you just have this passion for it, whether it's art, working out, climbing a mountain, whatever that may be, that's the lover archetype. So it's really responsible for these emotions that we go through. It governs a man's capacity to feel, to connect, to experience meaning and pleasure without losing structure. And that's where the king archetype comes in, is helps provide the structure. But the lover archetype is not just losing complete control and going willy-nilly, whatever comes your way that you want to chase. The archetype men most suppress is this lover archetype. And it's just the fact that the lover archetype was never trained. As a matter of fact, all the archetypes probably weren't trained because, one, you have to be aware of them, and two, you have to know how to train them and work with them. And this is where a coach comes in, like myself, to help understand what these four archetypes are. But in particular, the lover archetype really gets suppressed a lot. So it's about feeling deeply without collapse, right? Sometimes we just collapse into it, but this is feeling deeply, whether it's a positive feeling or a not so positive feeling. And we want to experience pleasure without addiction. Oh, this felt so good, let me do it again, like a general in junkies or gambling or any of those other things that we can become addicted to. We want to be able to experience as a one-off event and going, wow, that was great. I don't need to keep chasing it. That was wonderful. And we want to be able to connect with other people without losing authority, right? Sometimes when we connect with people, we give up our authority. We place our power in them, whether it's a female, a male, or just a friend, right? We lose our authority because when we connect, we give up part of ourselves. But the lover archetype is that we connect without losing that authority. And we want to stay alive without losing our edge, right? So we want to go out into the world and have a great time and enjoy all that the world has to offer, but we also don't want to lose that edge that keeps us, one foot in that part of the world, another foot in one reality of the world. So we want to keep that edge going. And so what we want to, when we look at this, is, right, there's a gap. There's a gap at who we are, and there's a gap at the ultimate expression of the lover. And we just want to name that gap, not blame, just reality. This is where it's kind of like a starting line. Okay, I have no idea where this lover archetype is, and I'm at a -1. Great, just name it, and then there's no blame. We can just work with it from there. So the core function of the lover archetype is vital force, this energetic force, right? It's emotional aliveness. It's not crying all the time or laughing all the time or being mad, but it's feeling every single emotion that we have, accepting it and feeling it deeply. It doesn't mean that we have to camp out with each of them emotions, but what it does mean is we don't suppress it. We know what's coming up, we understand it, and we express it in a healthy way, and then we can move on. And that may be in 1 second, 1 minute, 1 hour, or one day. So we also, this part of this core function is connection to beauty and meaning. So again, I mentioned about a sunrise or a sunset or art or even just a classic car, right? We connect with beauty. We go, oh man, that's so nice. And then with the meaning, we want, what is the meaning of life? What is the meaning of our life? We may not have the answer through the lover archetype, but we can connect with this meaning. Like, what is this? I really want to understand this. And that can be a very powerful experience unto itself. And then obviously the sensory pleasure, right? Whether it's physical, smell, taste, visual, whatever, it's all those sensory pleasures that we can expose ourselves to without limiting and without becoming addicted to them. And then it's the intimacy without performance, right? Sometimes, the shadow side is like, oh, I got to perform, I got to show off, I got to do whatever with intimacy. But this is intimacy, just being yourself. Whatever happens, happens, and embracing that part. And so the lover circulates life through strength, right? Because there's some constraints in these things we talked about, but that comes from the king, right? Setting up those boundaries, if you will, but it doesn't restrict the circulation of life that goes through the lover archetype. So this is a function. It's not a personality, it's a function of the archetype. So then we can talk a little bit about the shadow dominance, right? When pleasure has no container, when there's no constraint, when the king may be not involved in it. And this can be dopamine without depth. We just go on to the next hit, and this can be as simple as, TikTok or Facebook or anything else, or it could be gambling, one bet after another, one after another. It could be sex, it could be drugs, whatever it is. It's just this dopamine without depth. It's just superficial. Get the next fix. Get the next fix. And then we have intensity, which replaces intimacy, and we can have that intense part with our partner, and it's very intense, but it's not intimate. We're not opening up. We're performing, right? We have this intensity. We want to perform well, so we're viewed a certain way, but we lack that intimacy on it. And this is again part of the shadow part of the lover, right? And it's stimulation without satisfaction. And that is, just we go for a stimulant, whether it's beer, alcohol, pornography, sports, gambling, right? We stimulate ourselves, which goes along with the dopamine, but without satisfaction. It just doesn't fill that void. It just doesn't. And because the void is something completely different than we're trying to fill, because we're doing it through a shadow part of the lover archetype. An escapism disguised as reward. Oh, I'm going to go for a vacation here, and I'm going to go with this person. I'm going to do this. I'm going to go to this game. And we just escape life and we call it reward. Well, I've worked hard, so I'm going to eat this chocolate cake. I work hard, so I'm going to do this. And then we get to this indulgence. And this is all part of the shadow side of the lover, right? So, it's interesting because most high performing men don't look reckless. They do look controlled. But what's interesting is that the compulsions move underground, right? Meaning that they're suppressing all these compulsions, and they look in control, but in reality, they're just trying to hold a big air balloon underwater, and they're just fighting with it. So there's two expressions of the shadow, right? Addiction or numb. Over consuming to feel alive, right? Over consuming alcohol, food, pornography, whatever that might be. There's this overconsumption to feel alive. And then there's the shutdown, stay controlled. And that shutdown, we may use the same thing. Alcohol to feel alive, alcohol to shut down. Drugs to feel alive, drugs to shut down. Or we could just consume in watching so much TV to feel alive, and we can overconsume to shut down and pretend like we're staying in control. But then, we chase novelty. So we chase the next shiny object, and that can be an addiction, right? What happens now? What happens now? What happens now? And then, that can get carried away to a point where we just get numb to it because we're so overexposed. And then we avoid depth, right? Again, these are the two: addiction or numbing. Avoiding depth would be a numbing to the circumstance, a numbing to the individual that you're looking at. And when you're avoiding depth, and then we generally know these symptoms when they show up. We haven't realized that it's part of our archetypal structure, and we avoid it because we go numb to avoid the depth part of it. And when we understand why we're doing it, then we can embrace the healthy part of the lover. Right? Excess and numbness are twins, right? Both signal uncontained vitality. And so where it shows up, and this is what I'm trying to do with the podcast here, is show you some of the things of the lover archetype you can have with the king, the magician, and the warrior, and then some of the cost of uncontained pleasure here. Relationships feel transactional, right? And sex becomes performance or escape. Achievement feels empty. Discipline becomes dry, right? There's no advice, just recognition. So all of these is when we are in that shadow side of the lover archetype. It just is everything is shallow. There's no meaning, there's no joy, there's no energy. It's just one act for another to another to another. And when we get to that way, then we really become numb to all of the great things life has to offer, and we miss them completely. And then we just start to get bored. And then there's, the addiction route that we go through and other routes. And so this lover archetype is really, really powerful in our emotions. And when we understand where they're coming from, are we suppressing them or what are we doing? We can then really stay alive in the world in a healthy way. So we'll take a look about this, the lover and the king. Vitality requires structure. So the king gives the structure, the lover has the vitality. The king provides that containment of how we're going to use our energy. And the boundaries protect pleasure instead of spilling out all over the place. It says this is acceptable, this is not. And when we know that, then we are able to actually enjoy that pleasure more deeply. Standards prevent leakage. Otherwise, again, we'll chase shiny objects, whether that could be another partner every other week, or it could be another job every other week, or it could be whatever, a new car, whatever it is. But the standards prevent this leakage. And then the authority of the king stabilizes desire. So, we probably have all the desires to do things, to buy things, but the king puts that lover archetype into containment, so we don't go willy-nilly and spend all our money someplace else or overconsume or do whatever those unhealthy habits are. Containment does not reduce pleasure, it deepens it, right? So if we don't have containment, it's very spread, very wide, but very thin. But when we have containment, we have the same amount of pleasure and vitality, but it goes deeper. We have this meaning associated, so it's not just transactional. And then we have the lover and the warrior. Aliveness fuels discipline, right? Discipline without vitality dries out. We can have this discipline of going to the gym, discipline of eating healthy, discipline of this. But if we don't have this passion and energy behind it, it's like, why bother? I don't feel anything. It's just, again, just transactional. And so then the pleasure supports the endurance. Like when I'm climbing a mountain or hiking long distance, it's the pleasure of that keeps me going. So those are both the lover and the warrior. It supports the endurance. And if we don't have that warrior part, we can just burn ourselves out very, very quickly. An emotional depth strengthens resolve, right? So we have this emotional depth through the lover, and then it strengthens this resolve. This is what I'm going to do. And it doesn't have to be physical. It could be a career-wise as well. And then the strengthened feels worth sustaining, right? So we have the strength, through the lover part on what we want to do, and then the sustaining of it comes through the warrior. So you can see these both work very well together. Men burn out when strength loses meaning. When we don't know why we're strong, why we're doing it, there's no meaning, it burns out, and then we just give up and move on to something else. And the last one here is the lover and the magician, right? Perception shapes desire. What you focus on expands. So the magician, what do you focus on? And the lover wants to focus on, those powerful things, the sunsets, the beautiful skies, the birds, the nature, right? We focus on that, and the magician helps us expand that awareness. And the meaning determines the craving. So the meaning from the lover, what do we mean by this? It determines that craving, that desire for something, which is the magician part of manifestation. And awareness prevents compulsion. So when we are aware of what we're doing, this is the third Oreo I'm eating, I better put them away, then it prevents that compulsion. And then clarity regulates impulse. And both of these are all when the lover and the magician are working together. So desire without awareness becomes addiction. So the desire is that lover part, and the awareness is the magician part. And so let's just go real quick through this. The healthy lover has pleasure with containment. The shadow lover is compulsive stimulation. The healthy lover, emotional regulated. The unhealthy, or the shadow, emotion overwhelms or numbs. And then you can see here on these also the presence deepens with intimacy. The shadow lover, intensity replaces intimacy. With the healthy lover, aliveness supports discipline. And with the shadow, aliveness disrupts discipline. And then finally, with the healthy lover, it's the vitality is sustainable. And with the shadow lover, his vitality leaks. So that's a great comparison and side by side. The difference is not desire, it's structure. It's not that the desires aren't in the healthy and the shadow, but it's how it's structured and used. So, integrating the lover archetype is not about indulgence, it's about regulation. It requires the capacity to receive sensation without losing containment, to feel pleasure without compulsive reach, and to experience emotion without outsourcing responsibility. Men were never taught how to do this. They were taught to choose between edge and aliveness, between discipline and pleasure, between control and connection. And when the lover is integrated, strength does not soften, and it's worth sustaining. If you want to see the show notes on this part of the podcast, the lover archetype, you can do so by visiting warriormindcoach.com. While you're over there, you can see other podcasts such as The Magician and The Warrior and the King. And you can also see some blog posts there and find out how to book your power strategy call. Since you'll be on the internet, you can follow me on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, and Pinterest, all under Warrior Mind Coach. Thanks for spending this time with me on the Warrior Mind podcast. Remember, your mind is not neutral. If you don't train it intentionally, it'll be shaped by the world around you. Until next time, stay strong, stay aware.